The alien observation. The battlefield was silent now, except for the faint crackle of fires burning in the distance. Alien Commander Zortak stood on a ridge, his sharp eyes scanning the wreckage below. His troops had won, of course. They always won. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything these primitive species could muster. Every battle followed the same pattern: invade, overwhelm, conquer. Efficient, predictable. But this time, something was different. His gaze settled on a group of human soldiers who, impossibly, were still standing. They were bloodied, battered, and outnumbered. By all logic, they should have been dead hours ago. But there they were, gripping their crude weapons, breathing heavily, their faces smeared with dirt and sweat. Zortak watched in disbelief as one of them, a man with a deep gash running down his leg, stumbled forward. The wound should have rendered him useless, yet he moved with a stubborn determination that defied understanding. Zortak turned to his second-in-command, a cold, calculating officer named Frolic. "Why are they still fighting?" he hissed, his voice filled with confusion and a hint of something new, something he had never felt before when facing another species: doubt. Frolic consulted the data streaming into his visor, analyzing the human physiology. "They are inefficient, Commander," he replied, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Their biology is weak, inconsistent. They bleed too easily. Their bodies are fragile. They should have fallen by now." "But they haven't," Zortak growled. He watched as the human with the leg wound raised his weapon and fired, striking down one of Zortak's elite soldiers with terrifying precision. The alien soldier crumpled, lifeless, while the human barely flinched. Another human, a woman missing 3 fingers, shouted something in their harsh, guttural language, rallying the remaining soldiers. They moved as one, their formation sloppy but their spirit unbroken. It made no sense. The battle dragged on far longer than it should have. The humans were outmatched in every conceivable way, technologically, physically, tactically. And yet, they refused to surrender. Even when their ammunition ran low, even when their bodies failed them, they kept pushing forward, as if sheer willpower alone could carry them through. When the final human fell, it wasn't from a lack of trying. His body collapsed from exhaustion, his heart finally giving out after pushing far beyond what any rational being should have been capable of. Zortak descended from the ridge, stepping carefully over the scorched earth, his mind racing. He needed answers. As he moved among the dead, his sharp eyes caught something, a flicker of movement, a human, barely alive, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Against all odds, he was still conscious, his eyes burning with a strange mix of defiance and amusement. Zortak signaled to his soldiers. "Take him alive," he ordered. The troops hesitated, glancing nervously at the human, as if afraid to get too close. But they obeyed, dragging the barely conscious man into a containment pod. As the pod sealed shut, Zortak leaned in, studying the human's battered face. The man's lips curled into a weak smile, his voice hoarse but steady. "You think this is over?" the human rasped. "You have no idea what you've started." Zortak felt a chill run down his spine, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. The human shouldn't be capable of speech, let alone smiling after what he'd endured. This wasn't just illogical. It was impossible. The commander turned away, masking his unease. "Bring him to the lab," he barked. "I want to know exactly what makes these creatures tick." As his soldiers carried the human away, Zortak stared out over the battlefield, the scent of smoke and blood heavy in the air. For the first time in his long, victorious career, he felt the tiniest seed of fear take root in his mind. Because deep down, he knew the truth. This wasn't just another conquest. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous: the experiment. Deep within the sterile, metallic corridors of the alien research vessel Fraxel, the captured human lay restrained on an examination table. The lights overhead pulsed a cold, clinical blue, reflecting off the smooth, featureless walls. Alien scientists hovered around the human's motionless form, their translucent skin shimmering faintly as they adjusted their instruments. Their eyes, cold and analytical, betrayed no emotion, only the hunger for understanding. To them, this was just another specimen, another puzzle to be solved. But this specimen was different. Commander Zortak stood behind a reinforced glass wall, observing in silence. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, his mind replaying the events of the battlefield over and over. This human had survived wounds that should have killed him, had smiled in the face of certain death. It made no sense, and Zortak hated things that didn't make sense. The lead scientist, Vrelnak, approached the table, his long fingers tapping rhythmically against a datapad. "The subject's vitals are inconsistent," he murmured, his voice tinged with confusion. "Heart rate fluctuating erratically. Adrenaline levels are dangerously high, yet the body shows no signs of failure. It's as if the stress is fueling him rather than wearing him down." Zortak narrowed his eyes. "Begin the dissection," he ordered. "I want to see what's inside that makes him so resilient." Vrelnak hesitated. "Commander, the subject is still conscious." Zortak's expression hardened. "Then sedate him." The scientists activated a series of syringes, filled with potent sedatives capable of rendering the largest beasts in the galaxy unconscious in seconds. The needles pierced the human skin, delivering their chemical payload with precision. For a moment, the human's breathing slowed, his eyes fluttering shut. But then, something impossible happened. The human's eyes snapped open, wide and alert. His body jerked against the restraints, muscles straining with unnatural strength. The sedatives should have overwhelmed his system, but instead, his heart rate spiked, pumping the chemicals through his bloodstream as if they were nothing more than water. The alien scientists recoiled in shock. Vrelnak's fingers trembled as he checked his datapad again. This isn't possible," he whispered. "The sedatives aren't working. His body is adapting." The human turned his head slightly, locking eyes with Zortak through the glass. A slow, defiant smile spread across his bruised face. "You're gonna have to try harder than that," he rasped, his voice hoarse but steady. Zortak felt an unfamiliar sensation coil in his chest. Unease. He slammed his fist against the control panel. "Increase the dosage," he barked. "I want him unconscious now." Vrelnak complied, injecting the human with a second, even stronger dose. The room fell silent as the scientists watched, waiting for the inevitable. But the inevitable never came. Instead of succumbing to the chemicals, the human's body seemed to thrive on them. His breathing steadied, his eyes grew sharper, and the veins in his arms bulged with renewed strength. It was as if his biology was rewriting itself in real time, overcoming every obstacle the aliens threw at it. "This defies all known biological principles," Vrelnak muttered, his voice trembling with both awe and fear. "No species should be able to withstand this level of physiological stress." Zortak's mind raced. He had faced countless enemies in his time, species with advanced technology, formidable strength, and unparalleled intelligence. But never had he encountered a species that refused to die. It wasn't just the human's body that was the problem. It was something deeper, something intangible. The human chuckled softly, the sound echoing eerily in the sterile room. "You think poking and prodding is gonna give you answers," he sneered. "You'll never figure it out, because it's not just in here." He jerked his head toward his chest. "It's in here." He tapped his temple with a restrained finger. "And you can't dissect that." Zortak's fists clenched at his sides. He turned to Vrelnak, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't care how you do it. Find out what makes them this way. Break him if you must." But as the scientists prepared their next round of experiments, a chilling realization began to settle over the room like a heavy fog. The human wasn't breaking. If anything, he was getting stronger. Hours turned into days as the experiments grew more invasive and brutal. They subjected the human to extreme temperatures, exposed him to toxins, even deprived him of food and water. But each time they pushed his limits, he pushed back harder. His body adapted, healed, and fought against the odds with a stubbornness that defied all logic. And it wasn't just physical. The human's mind remained unbroken. He laughed in the face of pain, taunted his captors, and told stories of Earth, stories of a world where nature itself was an adversary. He spoke of icy mountains that froze skin to bone, of deserts that scorched flesh, of wild predators that hunted men for sport. He spoke of wars, of hardship, of a history carved from suffering and survival. "You think this is torture?" he sneered during one particularly brutal session. "You should see rush hour traffic in New York." The alien scientists didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. The human wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. And that terrified them. One evening, as Zortak reviewed the endless, inconclusive reports, a message came through from the communications deck. It was brief, just 2 words, but they sent a chill down his spine. "We're coming." Zortak stared at the screen, his mind racing. How could the humans know where their comrade was being held? How could they be organizing a response so quickly? But deep down, he knew the answer. Because humans didn't leave their own behind. And if one human could withstand everything the Vraxel had thrown at him, Zortak could only imagine what an army of them could do. He turned back to the observation window, watching as the human, bruised, bloodied, and still smiling, locked eyes with him once more. "You're out of time," the human whispered, his voice barely audible through the glass. But Zortak heard it loud and clear. For the first time in his life, Commander Zortak felt fear. Real, bone-deep fear. The human spirit. Far across the cold void of space, on the blue and green planet called Earth, the news of the alien invasion and the captured soldiers spread like wildfire. The initial shock of extraterrestrial contact had been quickly replaced by outrage and grim determination. Humanity had faced many threats in its turbulent history: wars, plagues, natural disasters. But this was something entirely different. And yet, the reaction was the same: fight back. In the dimly lit command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Elena Vasquez stared at the holographic projection hovering over the table. It showed the last known location of the alien vessel Vraxel, drifting in orbit around a barren moon in an uncharted system. The data was incomplete, fragmented from the chaos of the battle, but it was enough. The message they had received from the captured soldier, a single, garbled transmission filled with static and pain, had been enough. "He's alive," Vasquez said, her voice steady, though her clenched fists betrayed her tension. "And we're going to get him back." Around her, a team of military leaders, scientists, and strategists exchanged grim nods. They all knew the stakes. This wasn't just about rescuing one man. It was about sending a message. Humanity would not be bullied. They would not be dissected like lab rats. If the aliens thought they could take what they wanted without consequence, they were in for a rude awakening. The plan came together quickly. It had to. Time was not on their side. But that had never stopped humanity before. Where other species might have hesitated, bogged down by fear or bureaucracy, humans thrived in chaos. They adapted, improvised, and overcame. It was in their nature. As the rescue team prepared, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Soldiers sharpened their weapons and checked their gear, their faces set with grim determination. Engineers worked around the clock to retrofit Earth's primitive spacecraft with salvaged alien technology, turning clunky human ships into something far more dangerous. Scientists pored over data, looking for any weakness, any advantage that could tip the scales in their favor. But it wasn't just technology or tactics that fueled them. It was the human spirit. In the barracks, a young soldier named Jackson sat quietly, polishing his rifle. His thoughts drifted to the captured man, the one who had survived against all odds. Jackson didn't know him personally, but that didn't matter. He was a fellow human, and that was enough. He thought about his own family, about the stories his grandfather used to tell of fighting in wars long past, of standing shoulder to shoulder with comrades and refusing to back down. This was no different. The enemy might be from another world, but the fight was the same. "We're not just rescuing him," Jackson muttered under his breath. "We're showing them who we are." The day of the mission arrived, and the rescue team boarded their ships under the cover of darkness. The fleet, a ragtag mix of human ingenuity and stolen alien tech, roared to life and pierced the atmosphere, heading into the blackness of space. There was no turning back now. Back on the Vraxel, Commander Zortak paced the cold metal floor of his command chamber, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. The human prisoner had been subjected to every test, every form of torture and manipulation the aliens could devise. And yet, he still refused to break. Even now, as the alien scientists debated their next move, the human sat in his cell, bruised and bloodied, but with that same infuriating smirk on his face. Zortak had conquered dozens of worlds. He had crushed rebellions, extinguished entire civilizations, but never had he encountered a species like this, one that defied logic, that thrived on adversity. It was as if their weakness was their strength. The more they suffered, the stronger they became. And then the message had come. "We're coming." Zortak had dismissed it at first as empty bravado, but as the hours passed, reports began to filter in from the outer perimeter. Unidentified ships, moving fast, defying conventional tactics. The alien defenses, designed to repel organized fleets with predictable strategies, struggled to keep up with the chaotic, reckless human assault. They attacked in waves, seemingly unafraid of death, their unpredictability throwing the aliens into disarray. In the observation room, Zortak watched the prisoner closely. The human was humming now, a soft, tuneless sound that grated on Zortak's nerves. It was the sound of someone who wasn't afraid. "You seem awfully calm for someone who's about to die," Zortak sneered, stepping closer to the glass. The human looked up, his eyes glinting with amusement despite the swelling and bruises. "You don't get it, do you?" he rasped. "I'm not the one you should be worried about." As if on cue, the ship trembled violently, the lights flickering as distant explosions rocked the hull. Alarms blared, and Zortak's communicator buzzed with frantic reports from his officers. The humans were inside. They had breached the outer defenses far quicker than anyone had anticipated. Zortak's blood ran cold. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to be inferior, weak, predictable, but nothing about them was predictable. The human leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the glass. "You think this is over?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "This is just the beginning." Chaos erupted throughout the Vraxel as human soldiers flooded the corridors, their makeshift weapons tearing through the alien ranks. They moved with a fury born not just of survival, but of vengeance. Every step they took was a message. You don't mess with humanity and walk away unscathed. Jackson led one of the squads, his rifle steady as he navigated the twisting alien corridors. The environment was foreign, hostile, but that didn't matter. He had trained for this. They all had. The humans pushed forward with relentless determination, their losses fueling their resolve rather than breaking it. They finally reached the prisoner's cell, and as the door hissed open, the captured man looked up, a wide grin splitting his battered face. "Took you long enough," he chuckled. Jackson extended a hand, helping him to his feet. "Couldn't let you have all the fun," he replied. As they fought their way back to the extraction point, the human soldiers left a trail of destruction in their wake. The aliens, for all their superior technology and strategy, couldn't comprehend the sheer willpower, the unbreakable spirit of their human adversaries. They had made a fatal mistake, underestimating the one thing that made humanity truly dangerous: their refusal to quit. As the humans escaped into the blackness of space, leaving the Vraxel in ruins behind them, Commander Zortak stared out at the retreating ships, his mind reeling. This wasn't over. He knew that now. The humans had shown him something far more terrifying than advanced weaponry or superior numbers. They had shown him their spirit. And that was something no alien force in the galaxy could ever hope to defeat. The rescue mission. The Vraxel's sleek, metallic hull shimmered against the emptiness of space, its scars from the initial skirmish glowing faintly where human weapons had struck. Inside, the corridors buzzed with tension. The alien crew moved quickly, their once confident strides replaced by hurried, nervous glances. The sounds of distant explosions echoed faintly through the vessel, a constant reminder that the humans were no longer just a distant nuisance. They were inside. Commander Zortak stood at the heart of the ship's command center, his piercing gaze fixed on the holographic display in front of him. Red dots, human intruders, blinked and multiplied across the ship's schematic, weaving through the labyrinthine corridors like an unstoppable infection. His officers barked orders, their voices sharp with anxiety, but Zortak barely heard them. His mind was elsewhere, racing through strategies, trying to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The humans should have been wiped out in the first assault, their primitive technology no match for the alien empire's might. Yet here they were, tearing through the Vraxel's defenses with a ferocity that defied logic. They didn't fight like the other species Zortak had conquered. They didn't retreat when outnumbered, didn't surrender when wounded. They adapted, they endured, and they kept coming. Zortak's gaze flicked to the security feed showing the human prisoner. Despite everything, the experiments, the torture, the isolation, the man sat calmly in his cell, his posture relaxed, a faint smile still playing on his bruised lips. It was as if he knew this was going to happen, as if he had been waiting for it. Another tremor rocked the ship, stronger this time. The lights flickered, and Zortak's officers exchanged panicked glances. The humans were getting closer. In a distant corridor, Jackson led his squad through the dimly lit halls, his heart pounding in sync with the rhythmic thud of boots against metal. The alien architecture loomed around them, cold, sterile, and utterly foreign. But the fear that might have accompanied such an environment was nowhere to be found. The adrenaline coursing through his veins drowned out any hesitation. The mission was simple: get in, find their man, and get out. But as simple as it sounded, the execution was anything but. The aliens had superior weapons, advanced technology, and an intimate knowledge of their ship. The humans, on the other hand, had desperation, grit, and the kind of stubborn determination that came from knowing failure wasn't an option. They had retrofitted alien plasma rifles, scavenged from the battlefield, jury-rigged explosives from ship parts, and used guerrilla tactics that the aliens couldn't predict. It wasn't just a rescue mission, it was a declaration of defiance. Jackson signaled his team to halt at an intersection. He pressed his back against the cold wall, listening intently. The faint hum of alien voices echoed from around the corner. With a swift motion, he pointed 2 fingers forward, signaling the team to move. They rounded the corner silently, their movements fluid and precise. The aliens never saw them coming. A flash of light erupted as Jackson's squad opened fire, plasma bolts slicing through the air. The alien soldiers scrambled, their disciplined ranks dissolving into chaos as the humans pressed forward with reckless abandon. They fought not with the precision of a well-oiled machine, but with the unpredictable ferocity of cornered animals. The skirmish was over in seconds, leaving the corridor littered with alien bodies. Jackson didn't pause to savor the victory. Time was running out. As they pushed deeper into the ship, the resistance grew fiercer. The aliens had realized the humans were not just a minor annoyance. They were a threat. But that realization had come too late. Every time the aliens adapted their tactics, the humans shifted theirs even faster, turning every strength into a weakness, every advantage into a liability. Finally, they reached the prisoner's cell. The door was reinforced with alien alloys, designed to withstand any conventional breach. But humans had a knack for turning the unconventional into the possible. Jackson knelt by the door, pulling a small cylindrical device from his pack. It was a fusion of human ingenuity and stolen alien tech, a makeshift breaching charge that hummed ominously as he activated it. He pressed it against the door and stepped back. "Fire in the hole," he muttered. The explosion was sharp and focused, the door crumpling inward with a screech of tortured metal. Smoke billowed from the entrance as Jackson and his team stormed inside, weapons raised. The human prisoner looked up from his seat, a wide grin spreading across his face as he sought his rescuers. "Took you long enough," he rasped, his voice rough from days of torture, but filled with unmistakable warmth. Jackson offered a hand, pulling the man to his feet. "Couldn't let you hog all the fun." The prisoner, Sergeant Mason, winced as he stood, but there was a fire in his eyes that hadn't dimmed despite everything he'd endured. "Let's get out of here," he said, his tone resolute. They'd retraced their steps through the corridors, the alien forces closing in from all sides. But the humans fought like demons, their retreat a whirlwind of gunfire and explosions. Mason, despite his injuries, fought alongside them, his every shot a testament to the unbreakable spirit that had baffled and terrified his captors. As they neared the extraction point, the alien resistance grew desperate. Zortak, watching from the command center, realized with a sinking heart that he was losing control. The humans were slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. In a last-ditch effort, he ordered the ship's self-destruct sequence, hoping to take the intruders down with him. But even that plan unraveled. The humans had anticipated it. Jackson's team reached the escape pods just as the Vraxel began to tremble violently, the countdown echoing through the ship's comms. They launched into space seconds before the ship erupted in a cascade of fire and debris, the shockwave rippling through the void like a dying gasp. From the safety of their extraction vessel, Mason watched the explosion with a grim smile. "They thought they could break us," he murmured, shaking his head. "They don't understand what we're made of." Jackson nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "They will." As the rescue ship sped back toward Earth, carrying its battered but unbroken passengers, the message was clear. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were winning. And this was only the beginning. The alien panic. The distant stars shimmered like silent witnesses to the chaos that had unfolded aboard the Vraxel. Now that once proud alien vessel was nothing more than drifting debris, a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered pride, floating aimlessly through the void. The humans had come, they had seen, and against all logic, they had won. But the battle was just the beginning. On the distant homeworld of the Salveri Dominion, a sprawling civilization that stretched across dozens of star systems, the news of the Vraxel's destruction hit like a seismic wave. The grand halls of the High Council, usually filled with calm deliberation and strategic planning, erupted into chaos. The air was thick with disbelief, confusion, and most unsettling of all, fear. The Salveri had never encountered such a problem before. They were the apex of galactic evolution, superior in technology, intellect, and military might. They had crushed countless species under their heel, bending entire civilizations to their will. But now, their carefully constructed narrative of invincibility was crumbling, all because of one species that made no sense: humans. The High Council convened an emergency session, their tall, slender forms draped in ceremonial robes that shimmered under the cold, sterile lights. Holographic projections of the Vraxel's final moments hovered in the center of the chamber, playing the destruction on an endless loop. The images were almost too absurd to believe. Primitive human ships breaching the unbreachable, human soldiers overwhelming elite Salveri forces with sheer unpredictability and brute willpower. "This cannot be," High Chancellor Varkesh hissed, his voice echoing through the chamber. His translucent skin pulsed with the deep red hue of anger. "They are primitive. They should not have been able to penetrate our defenses, let alone destroy one of our finest ships. But they did," another council member, Lorvin, replied. his voice low and filled with unease. He gestured to the holographic feed, pausing on the image of the captured human soldier, Sergeant Mason, smiling as the alien vessel crumbled around him. And they did it with ease. A heavy silence settled over the council. The implications were clear. This wasn't just a fluke or a stroke of luck. Humanity had demonstrated something far more dangerous than advanced technology or numbers. They had shown resilience, adaptability, and an unyielding will to survive. These were traits that HFY couldn't quantify, couldn't predict, and that terrified them. Varkesh turned to the lead scientist, Dralvin, whose team had been responsible for studying human biology aboard the Vraxel. "Explain this," he demanded. "How did your experiments fail to uncover their weakness?" Dralvin shifted uncomfortably, his usually confident demeanor now cracked with doubt. "Their biology is chaotic," he admitted reluctantly. "We anticipated weaknesses, fragility, susceptibility to pain, exhaustion. But their bodies adapt to stress in ways we've never encountered. Wounds that should be fatal only make them fight harder. Pain that should cripple them fuels their aggression. Their biology is not logical." Varkesh's eyes narrowed. "And their minds?" Dralvin hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Even more baffling. They possess an emotional resilience that defies all our psychological models. Fear, pain, loss. These things don't break them. They motivate them. They seem to draw strength from their suffering, from each other. It's unprecedented." A murmur of unease rippled through the council. The HFY prided themselves on their cold logic and analytical precision. Emotions were seen as weaknesses, remnants of lesser species. But here was a species whose greatest strength was their emotion, their spirit, their refusal to accept defeat. Varkesh slammed a clawed hand onto the table, silencing the murmurs. "Then we will do what we've always done," he snarled. "We will crush them. If their strength lies in their spirit, we will extinguish it. We will burn their planet to ash, erase their history, their culture, their very existence." The council erupted into a cacophony of agreement, their fear masked by the bravado of their empire's might. But beneath the surface, doubt lingered. They had never faced an enemy like this before. And deep down, they knew it. Preparations began immediately. A fleet larger than any the HFY had ever deployed was assembled, a dark armada of destruction designed for one purpose: the complete annihilation of Earth. The strategy was simple: overwhelm the humans with sheer force. Give them no time to adapt, no chance to fight back. But while the HFY planned their assault, Earth was not idle. Back in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Elena Vasquez stood before a massive holographic map of the solar system, her sharp eyes scanning the incoming data. The rescue mission had been a success, but the war was far from over. They knew the aliens wouldn't take their defeat lightly. Humanity had poked a sleeping giant, and now that giant was stirring. But humanity was ready. Sergeant Mason, still recovering from his ordeal aboard the Vraxel, stood beside Vasquez, his body covered in scars but his spirit unbroken. "They're coming," he said quietly, his voice a low growl of determination. Vasquez nodded. "Let them." Around them, Earth's leaders, scientists, and military strategists worked tirelessly, their minds sharp with focus. The alien technology salvaged from the battlefield, and the Vraxel had given humanity a crucial edge. They reverse-engineered weapons, upgraded their defenses, and most importantly, learned from their enemies' mistakes. But technology wasn't their greatest weapon. It was their unity. For the first time in history, humanity stood together. Nations that had once been divided by politics, borders, and old grudges now worked as one. Differences were set aside in the face of a common threat, and the result was a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. When the HFY fleet finally entered Earth's solar system, they were met not by fear, but by defiance. The battle began with a ferocity that shook the very fabric of space. The HFY unleashed their most devastating weapons, expecting swift victory. But the humans met them head-on, their ships darting and weaving through the enemy lines with unpredictable tactics and sheer audacity. What the humans lacked in technological sophistication, they made up for in creativity and relentless determination. On the ground, civilians joined the fight, turning cities into fortresses, using whatever they had at their disposal to resist the invasion. The Xalvari had expected to fight an army. They hadn't expected to fight everyone. In orbit, Mason led a squadron of retrofitted fighters, his mind sharp with purpose. Every maneuver, every shot fired was a message. We will not break. We will not fall. And as the battle raged on, something extraordinary happened. The Xalvari began to falter. Their perfect strategies unraveled in the face of human unpredictability. Their morale crumbled as they realized their superior technology couldn't compensate for their lack of understanding. The humans didn't fight by the rules. They made the rules, and in the chaos of war, that made them unstoppable. Commander Zortak, aboard the flagship of the Xalvari fleet, watched in horror as his forces were decimated. The same humans he had once dismissed as inferior were now tearing through his armada with a fury that defied explanation. They're not stopping, one of his officers whispered, panic evident in his voice. Zortak's claws tightened around the edge of his console. For the first time, he understood the true nature of his enemy. It wasn't their biology or their technology that made them dangerous. It was their spirit. And that was something no empire, no matter how powerful, could ever conquer. As the Xalvari fleet retreated, leaving behind the wreckage of their pride, humanity stood victorious, not just over an alien empire, but over the very idea that they could be defeated. And the galaxy watched in silence, realizing that the most dangerous species wasn't the one with the most advanced technology or the biggest ships. It was the one that refused to give up, the one that made no sense, the one that, against all odds, won. Humanity fights back. The dust of the alien invasion had barely settled, but Earth was far from resting. The scars of battle ran deep, from the shattered skyscrapers that once pierced the sky to the craters that pockmarked once thriving cities. Yet, amidst the destruction, humanity stood taller than ever. The Xalvari had come with the intent to erase Earth from existence, but instead they had ignited something far more dangerous, the unyielding fire of human defiance. In the makeshift war rooms beneath the surface, global leaders and military strategists gathered around holographic projections of the retreating Xalvari fleet. The aliens had fled, but no one on Earth believed they were gone for good. The Xalvari would regroup, rearm, and return with even greater force. But humanity wasn't planning to wait for that to happen. General Elena Vasquez, her uniform worn but her eyes sharp, addressed the assembly. "We've spent centuries fighting each other over borders and beliefs," she began, her voice echoing off the reinforced steel walls. "Now we fight for survival, not just ours, but for every species that might one day face the same threat. The Xalvari think they can come back stronger, but they haven't seen us at full strength." Her words were met with resolute nods. This wasn't just a defensive mission anymore. Humanity had tasted victory, and now they were ready to take the fight to the stars. Sergeant Mason, the man who had become a symbol of Earth's resilience after surviving the Vraxel, stood beside Vasquez, his body still marked with the evidence of alien torture, but his spirit unbroken. He had been the first to witness the true nature of the Xalvari, and he knew their weakness wasn't in their technology or tactics. It was in their inability to understand what made humans different. "They don't get it," Mason said, his voice gravelly but steady. "They think we're just another species to conquer. But we're not. We don't break. We don't quit. And when someone tries to wipe us out..." He let the words hang in the air, his gaze sweeping across the room. "We fight back." With that, the room erupted into action. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, reverse engineering captured alien technology and integrating it into human designs. Ships that had once been clunky and outdated were now sleek, efficient war machines, armed with a combination of human ingenuity and alien firepower. Weapons were modified, defenses strengthened, and new strategies devised that would turn humanity's unpredictability into their greatest advantage. But it wasn't just about technology. Humanity's greatest asset was its ability to adapt, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. They had learned from every battle, every loss, every scar, and they had grown stronger because of it. As the first wave of Earth's newly formed interstellar resistance fleet prepared for launch, Mason addressed the troops. Soldiers, pilots, engineers, and volunteers from every corner of the globe stood before him, their faces a tapestry of humanity's diversity. They came from different backgrounds, spoke different languages, but they were united by a single purpose: to ensure Earth would never be threatened again. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," Mason said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "We're fighting for every species that the Exalvari have tried to enslave or destroy. We're fighting because they believe we should have rolled over and died. But we didn't, and we won't." The fleet launched into the stars, leaving behind a planet forever changed. The journey to the Exalvari homeworld was long and treacherous, but the humans pressed forward with relentless determination. They navigated through asteroid fields, battled rogue alien patrols, and even faced the treacherous conditions of deep space, all while learning, adapting, and growing stronger with each challenge. Meanwhile, on the Exalvari homeworld, panic had taken root. The defeat at Earth had sent shockwaves through their society. The once confident leaders now met in secret, their discussions filled with fear and uncertainty. They had underestimated the humans, and now they faced the consequences. High Chancellor Varkesh stood before the council, his once proud demeanor now shadowed by doubt. "We cannot allow them to reach our homeworld," he hissed, his voice laced with desperation. "They are irrational, unpredictable. They are a threat to the very fabric of our empire." "But how do we stop them?" One council member whispered. "We've seen their resilience. Our weapons and strategies mean nothing against their spirit." The council fell into a heavy silence, the weight of their failure pressing down on them. They had always believed in their superiority, in the power of logic and order. But the humans had shattered that illusion, proving that sometimes chaos and emotion were stronger than any weapon. As the human fleet drew closer, the Exalvari prepared their defenses, fortifying their cities and mobilizing their armies. They believed they were ready, that this time they would crush the human threat once and for all. But once again, they underestimated what it meant to face humanity. The battle for the Exalvari homeworld was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans fought with a ferocity that defied comprehension, their tactics unpredictable, their resilience unmatched. They turned every disadvantage into an advantage, every setback into a stepping stone toward victory. Mason led the charge, his fighter weaving through enemy lines with impossible precision. He watched as his fellow soldiers executed daring maneuvers, using the very chaos that Exalvari feared to dismantle their defenses piece by piece. Every explosion, every fallen alien soldier was a reminder that humanity wasn't just surviving, they were thriving. On the ground, human forces clashed with Exalvari troops in brutal close-quarters combat. The aliens fought with cold precision, but the humans fought with heart. They drew strength from their comrades, from the memories of those they had lost, and from the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. In the heart of the Exalvari capital, Mason and his team confronted High Chancellor Varkesh. The alien leader, once so confident and untouchable, now stood trembling before the humans who had defied every expectation. You can't win," Varkesh stammered, his voice a mixture of disbelief and fear. "Your biology, your species, it makes no sense." Mason stepped forward, his eyes hard but not without a glimmer of compassion. "You're right," he said quietly. "It doesn't. But that's why we did win." With those final words, Humanity cemented its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as survivors, as fighters, as a species that refused to be defined by the limitations others tried to impose on them. The Xalvari were defeated, their empire shattered. But the legacy of their invasion lived on, a constant reminder of humanity's greatest strength, their ability to rise, to endure, and to fight back, no matter the odds. As the human fleet returned to Earth, their victory was not just a triumph over an alien empire. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit that made humanity unique in the vast expanse of the universe. And in that spirit, they would continue to fight, not just for themselves, but for every being who believed in the power of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable human will. Victory and the mystery of humanity. The skies above Earth were filled with the glow of returning ships, their hulls scarred from battle but their crews triumphant. The human fleet had done the impossible. They had taken the fight to the Xalvari homeworld and emerged victorious. The once feared alien empire was now in ruins, their fleets decimated, their leadership broken. But as humanity celebrated, a deeper question lingered in the minds of both victors and the scattered remnants of their defeated foes. How had they won? In the days following the final battle, Earth became a symbol not just of resilience, but of something far more profound: defiance in the face of inevitability. News of the Xalvari's defeat spread across the galaxy, reaching distant civilizations that had long lived in fear of the alien overlords. Species that had once cowered under the shadow of the Xalvari began to rise, emboldened by humanity's victory. For the first time in centuries, there was hope among the stars. But while the galaxy celebrated, the humans didn't rest. There was a strange tension in the air, an unspoken understanding that their victory wasn't just a result of strategy or superior weaponry. It was something deeper, something even they didn't fully comprehend. In a quiet hospital room in New York, Sergeant Mason lay in a recovery bed, staring out of the window at the dawn breaking over the city skyline. His body bore the marks of the battles he'd fought: scars, bruises, and lingering pain. But his mind was sharper than ever. The doctors had marveled at his recovery, noting that by all medical accounts, he should have succumbed to his injuries long ago. But Mason wasn't unique in this. Reports from across the fleet told similar stories: soldiers surviving wounds that should have been fatal, civilians displaying acts of bravery that defied logic, and entire communities bouncing back from devastation with astonishing speed. It wasn't just biology. It was something else. General Elena Vasquez visited Mason that morning, her sharp eyes softening slightly as she entered the room. "How's the hero of Earth feeling today?" she asked, pulling up a chair beside his bed. Mason chuckled, though it quickly turned into a wince. "Like I've been run over by a spaceship," he muttered, then glanced at her, his expression turning serious. "But you didn't come here to check on me, did you?" Vasquez shook her head. "No. I wanted to talk about this." She handed him a data pad, the screen displaying the latest reports from the field. Strange, unexplainable things were happening. Soldiers were recovering faster than medically possible. Communities were rebuilding at unprecedented speeds. Even Earth's environment, damaged by years of pollution and war, was healing in ways that defied scientific explanation. Mason scrolled through the reports, his brow furrowing. "You think this has something to do with the Xalvari?" he asked. Vasquez nodded slowly. "I think they triggered something in us, something we didn't even know was there." As they spoke, in a dark corner of the galaxy, the last surviving Xalvari warlord, Zortak, sat alone in the ruins of his once mighty empire. The stars above him were cold and indifferent, a stark contrast to the fire that burned in his chest. He replayed the final moments of the war over and over in his mind, trying to make sense of it all. The humans should have been easy to conquer, fragile, chaotic, and inferior in every measurable way. Yet they had defied every expectation, turning their weaknesses into strengths and their pain into power. Zortak couldn't understand it. He had studied their biology, their history, their culture, and none of it explained how they had managed to defeat the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. It was as if they were driven by something intangible, something beyond logic and science. In his final act of desperation, Zortak sent a transmission out into the void, a message to any surviving Salveri or potential allies who might still be listening. The humans are not what they seem. They are not bound by the rules that govern the rest of us. Their strength lies not in their bodies or their weapons, but in something we cannot quantify. Beware of them, for they are not just survivors. They are a force of nature. Back on Earth, the leaders of humanity gathered in a newly constructed global council chamber, built atop the ruins of what was once a United Nations headquarters. The room was filled with representatives from every nation, their faces reflecting the unity that had emerged from the ashes of war. The victory over the Salveri had not just saved Earth, it had transformed it. As the session began, Vasquez stood before the assembly, her voice steady and resolute. We've faced the worst the galaxy has to offer, and we've come out stronger. But our fight isn't over. The Salveri may be defeated, but there are others out there. Other threats, other empires. We need to be ready. Mason, seated in the front row, watched her with a mix of pride and unease. He knew she was right. The universe was vast and full of unknown dangers. But he also knew something else. Humanity was ready for whatever came next. The Council agreed to form the United Earth Defense Force, a coalition dedicated to protecting not just Earth, but any species threatened by tyranny and oppression. Humanity had discovered its place in the galaxy, and it wasn't as victims or conquerors. They were guardians, driven by a spirit that refused to be extinguished. In the months that followed, Earth's influence spread across the stars. Human ships patrolled distant sectors, offering aid to civilizations rebuilding from the Salveri's reign. They didn't demand tribute or loyalty in return. Their only request was simple: stand with us when the time comes. And that time came sooner than expected. A year after the fall of the Salveri, a new threat emerged from the depths of space, a race even older and more powerful than the Salveri, drawn by the rumors of humanity's impossible victory. They came not out of fear, but out of curiosity. They wanted to understand what made humans different, what gave them the strength to defy the odds. When their emissaries arrived on Earth, they were met not with fear or hostility, but with the same defiant spirit that had shattered the Salveri. Mason, now a decorated officer in the United Earth Defense Force, stood at the forefront of the welcoming delegation. As the alien emissary approached, towering and intimidating, Mason extended a hand. "Welcome to Earth," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We don't look for trouble, but if you bring it to our doorstep, you'll find out the hard way why we're still standing." The alien studied him for a long moment before finally speaking. "Your species defies logic. You should not have survived, let alone thrived." Mason smiled, the same defiant grin he had worn aboard the Fraxel. "Yeah, we get that a lot." As humanity continued to forge its path among the stars, one thing became clear to all who encountered them. It wasn't their technology, their weapons, or even their numbers that made them formidable. It was the mystery of humanity, their unbreakable will, their refusal to give up, and their ability to find strength in the very things that should have destroyed them. And in a universe governed by logic and order, that mystery was the most terrifying force of all.